We're going to be covering this question, validate subsequence. And the question reads, given a non-empty array of integers, we're going to be asked to write a function that determines whether the second array is a subsequence of the first one. And then they give the definition of a subsequence is a subsequence of an array is a set of numbers that aren't necessarily adjacent in the array, but that are in the same order as they appear in the array. I think it's important to note that one of the most important things in this question is that this underlying that it has to be in the same order, right? And I'll explain why. For instance, the numbers 1, 3, 4 form a subsequence of the array 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is because we're looking for 1, 3, and 4 in this order. And in the array, we have 1 as the first element, then we disregard 2, but then we have 3, and then we have 4. So the subsequence is found in this array. Okay. So one interesting thing why I said the order matters is we're not just looking, do the numbers in the sequence appear in the array? We're not looking for simply the numbers, but we're looking for the numbers and the order. If we were simply looking for just the numbers, we could just sort both arrays and then compare them. But since we're looking for the same order as a subsequence, the order matters and you need to do something else. So for this problem, I think it's important to sort of think about our base case, right? Okay, so one base case I see is that this array, it always has to be equal to or greater than the subsequence, right? So for example, we can't have array equals 1, 2, oops, and sequence equals 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? The sequence can never be larger than the array, right? Because then we're asking for more elements than the array could possibly contain. So one check that we can do is if array.size is less than, explicitly less than, sequence.size, we're going to return false in this instant. Right? And the reason we're returning false is that array cannot be smaller than the sequence. So one way to think about this is iteratively. Really simple to implement, pretty straightforward. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to iterate through the array, right? When we find a match for sequence sub 0, then we remove that element from sequence. So we're going to iterate through the array, and for each integer in the array, we're going to check to see if it matches or is equal to sequence sub 0. If we find a match, then we remove that element from the sequence. Now, at any point in the iteration, if we find that the size of sequence is 0, then we can return true because we return true because we have covered all elements in sequence array in order. So let's take a look at this example using the example on the left-hand side. Let's see how this algorithm would work intuitively, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. This is our array. and then we have 1, 3, 4. This is our sequence. So we're going to iterate through this array object, right? So in the first iteration, we're looking at 1, right? We're looking at 1, and we're looking at 1 in the sequence. So 1 is equal to 1, right? So we remove sequence sub 0, right? And once we remove sequence sub 0, the sequence array now changes. So just for easy sake, so I'm just going to copy this. On the next iteration, this is what the sequence array looks like, right? Then we say is 2 is not equal to 3. So we don't do anything, right? We just say, okay, 2 is not equal to 3. We don't need to adjust our sequence array. We can continue on with the iteration. Oops. Right? So now we're at 3. So 3 is equal to 3. So we remove sequence sub 0. Right? Now our sequence array is going, this. So now once we compare 3 is equal to 3, we remove the 0th index in the sequence. Our new sequence or sequence array is going to look like this. Finally, we compare 4 is equal to 4. So again, we remove sequence sub 0, and then our sequence array is now empty. Then we return true, right? So let's take a look at I'm going to put this a little bit more down. I'm going to start to write the code, right? So first thing, we're going to iterate through the array. So for each integer, we're just going to call it array num in array. All right. First thing we have to do is we have to grab the integer at sequence at index 0, right? So we say integer sequence num is equal to sequence.get integer at index 0. Okay. Next thing we have to do is this step, the comparative step. Okay. So if array sub num is equal to sequence sub num, we remove the sequence at the 0th index, right? So this is going to start to reduce our sequence array, and hopefully once we get to 0, we can return true. Next, we have to do this check. If we find that the size of the sequence is 0, then we can return true because we've covered all elements in order. All right, so let's copy this. In order. Okay, let's just shrink this. Okay. If sequence.size equals 0, return true. Now, one other thing that we can't forget is, let's say we make it all the way to the last element, right? And, you know, we're almost there, but for some reason it returns false, right? We still need to do this final check again right before we return false if the sequence array is still populated. So if we could just copy this. Okay. there. And then finally, we can return false. Now let's remove some of this white space. We can remove this example that I gave. And let's take a look. So the first thing we do is check our base case. So one of the base cases I spotted was that the size of array cannot be less than the sequence size. If that occurs, then we automatically know we have to return false. Now for the business logic side of the problem, we're going to iterate through the array. Each time we iterate, we're going to grab the 0th index, the number at the 0th index of sequence, right? And then we're going to compare the array num to the sequence num. If both of them are equal, then we know we found one element in our sequence. So we can remove the 0th index. And it's important to remind that since this is a list of integers, not an array, when you use the remove method, it automatically shifts elements one spot to the left, right? And then finally, what we do is we do our check. So we say if the size of the sequence is equal to 0, then return true, because we know we've covered each element and each number in the sequence array has been also found in the array. I think that's it. Let's run it. Oh, got some stack. This looks like a missing parentheses. Array.size. Missing a parentheses right here. Okay. Let's run it one more time. Looks like, yep, we passed all our test cases. Submit the code. And we're good to go here. Hope you guys liked the video. Like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate it. And thank you.